Hello, and welcome back to another reading of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Tonight we are starting Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits. I will be rereading a little bit from last time, but if you are just joining us or you want to catch yourself up to where we were, please go back and watch the previous videos and the previous staves. Highly recommend doing so. Otherwise, you can, if you just want the story portion of the video, please feel free to jump ahead to what I have written down here, or stick around for the opinions, facts, and historical portion of the video, or just jump ahead to when I pick up this book again. Anyway, hello, welcome. So tonight I want to tell you a little bit about the history of A Christmas Carol, or more specifically, of what ensued after this book's publication. Now, the novel was subject to Dickens' first actual public live reading, given at Birmingham Town Hall in the Industrial and Literary Institute on December 27, 1853. Literally 10 years after he released the book for the first time. Get it? Literally. I'm sorry, that was terrible. That was terrible. You could write on a piece of paper, it was so terrible. Okay, I'll stop. This was then released 3 days later to an audience of working people. So first they did a reading of it at the Literary Institute, and then later on re-released him reading to people of the working and middle classes. Of his own account and from the newspapers at the time, it was considered a great success, and he edited and adapted the piece for a listening rather than a reading audience. And then Dickens continued to give public readings later of A Christmas Carol until his death. So certainly this is why, or at least one of the reasons why, it is his most popular work, or at least the work that pretty much everyone knows him by. Not only that, but like also Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, these other kind of ones, David Copperfield, these other stories were also very popular at the time. However, A Christmas Carol is what we know Charles Dickens by today. For certainly the first book that most people are introduced to him as an author as. That makes sense? I don't even know. But there were earlier theater productions of A Christmas Carol produced in 1844, just weeks after the book was first published, and these ones also being sanctioned by Charles Dickens himself. The earliest one was on February 5th and was at the Surrey Theatre by C.Z. Barnett. There's also a version by Edward Sterling that was opened at the Adelphi Theatre, and it ran in London on... There was also another version that was sanctioned by Charles Dickens at the Adelphi Theatre by Edward Sterling. February 26, 1844 was that one, and it ran for over 40 nights. But certainly the movies are what play in everyone's minds when they think of A Christmas Carol. I know I certainly think of A Muppet's Christmas Carol when I think of it, or the 1984 version that had George C. Scott as Ebenezer Scrooge. I know a whole lot of people that think of this one when they think of it. A few others I know think of Jim Carrey as Scrooge. And now we have a new version that is coming out that will have Johnny Depp as Scrooge, or at least rumored to be. There's also another version with Sir Patrick Stewart, and even the Mickey Mouse crew from Disney has had their shot at A Christmas Carol with, I think, Scrooge McDuck playing Scrooge. Gee, I would wonder why they would pick McDuck. But did you know that there was a 1938 version of A Christmas Carol released with Reginald Owen playing Ebenezer Scrooge? And then there was also a 1951 version that was just entitled Scrooge, and it had Alistair Sim, Jack Warner, Brian Desmond Hurst and as the director, and a bunch of other really iconic 1950s actors. It was even older than those two still that in 1901, the very first movie starring Daniel Smith as Scrooge was a short silent British film of A Christmas Carol. It was entitled Scrooge or Marley's Ghost, and it was silent and done in black and white. It was actually quite compelling to watch them try to levitate somebody. It is only 5 minutes long. I highly recommend going to find it somewhere here on YouTube and watching the interesting mechanics of the 1900s in film industry. Regarded as the earliest surviving film as an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And we will continue our adaptation of A Christmas Carol, or at least my adaptation, starting with Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes beheld the solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist among the ground toward him. Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. "Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?" said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. "You are about to show me the shadows of the things that have not happened but will happen in the time before us," Scrooge pursued. "Is that so, spirit?" The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own hand to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black. "Ghost of the future," he exclaimed, "I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before him. "Lead on," said Scrooge. "Lead on. The night is waiting fast, and it is precious time to me. I know. Lead on, spirit." The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it, on 'change amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals, and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed towards them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it, either way. I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." "Why, what was the matter with him?" asked the third, talking a vast quantity of the snuff out of a very large snuff-box. "I thought he never died." "God knows," said the first with a yawn.
"What has he done with his money?"
asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey-cock. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin, yawning again. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the same speaker. "For upon my life I don't know anybody to go to it. Suppose me make up a party and volunteer?"
"I don't mind going if a lunch is provided,"
observed the gentleman with the excrescence on his nose.
"But I must be fed if I make one."
Another laugh.
"Well, I am the most disinterested among you after all," said the first speaker. "For I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anyone else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for he used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye."
Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided into another street. Its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanations might lie here. He knew these men, also perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point of always standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. "How are you?" said one. "How are you?" returned the other. "Well," said the first, "Old Scratch has got his own at last, eh?" "So I'm told," returned the second. "Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?" No. Something else to think of. Good morning." Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial, but feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost province was in the future. Nor could he think of anyone immediately connected with himself to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral of his own improvement, he resolved to treasure up every word he heard, and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. For he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him a clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easily. He looked about that very place for its own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to its usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his new-born resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, behind him stood the phantom with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand, and its situation in reference to himself, that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of town, where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their fences of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop, below a penthouse roof where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were brought. Upon the floor wherein were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, scales, weights, and refuse of iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in the mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sepulchres of bones. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a grey-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frowsy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh.
"Let the charwoman know alone to be the first," cried she who entered first. "Let the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it."
"You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlour. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Ah, how it squeaks! There ain't such a rusty bit of metal to the place of its own hinges, I believe, and I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. Ah, we're all suitable to our calling, and we're well matched. Come into the parlour. Come into the parlour."
The parlour was the space behind the screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair-rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was night, with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees, and looking with a bold defiance at the other two.
"What odds, then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber?" said the woman. "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did." "It's true, indeed," said the laundress. "No man more so." "Why, then, don't stand staring as if you were afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose." "No, indeed," said Miss Dilber
And the man together.
"We should hope not." "Very well, then," cried the woman. "That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose." "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. "If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, like a wicked old screw," pursued the woman, "why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have seen somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out last hour, alone by himself." "It's the truest word that was ever spoken," said Mrs. Dilber. "It's a judgment on him." "I wish it was a little heavier judgment," replied the woman. "And it should have been. You may depend on it. If I could have laid my hands on anything else, open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know what the value of it. Speak it out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor am I afraid for them to see it. We knew pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe."
But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting to the breech first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A steel or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up to a total when he found that there was nothing more to come.
"That's your account," said Joe, "and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?"
Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner.
"I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself," said old Joe. "That's your account. If you asked me for another penny, I made it an open question. I'd repent of being so liberal, and knock off half a crown."
"And now undo my bundle, Joe," said the first woman. Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff.
"What do you call this?"
said Joe.
"Bed curtains?"
returned the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arms.
"Bed curtains? You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with them lying there?"
said Joe.
"Yes, I do," replied the woman. "Why not?" "You were born to make your fortune," said Joe, "and you'll certainly do it."
"I certainly shan't owe my hand when I could get anything in it by reaching it out for the sake of such a man as he was. I promise you, Joe," returned the woman coolly. "Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now."
"His blankets?"
asked Joe.
"Who else's do you think?" replied the woman. "He isn't likely to take cold without 'em, I dare say."
"I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh?"
said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up.
"Don't you be afraid of that,"
returned the woman.
"I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. Ugh! You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it nor a threadbare piece. And it's the best he had, and a fine one too. I'd have washed it if it hadn't been for me."
"What do you call wasting of it?"
asked old Joe.
"Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure,"
replied the woman with a laugh.
"Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, then it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one."
Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror, as they sat grouped about their spoil. In the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp, he viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself. Laughed the same woman, when old Joe produced the flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon the ground.
"This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead."
"Spirit," said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?" He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself with awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced round it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it with a motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do so, and longed to do it, but had no power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. And that is where we stop for tonight. Stay tuned for tomorrow. Stay for part 2. Good night.